What is up, my bodyweight warriors, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about hand positioning in the handstand. Now this one is really fundamental. This is our point of contact with the ground, and it's really going to set up how good we are at handstands. Now this is important to note that I'm not necessarily going to talk about balancing in respect to the hands, because the hands play an important part of that. I've made a whole complete video on how to balance handstands, so I will link that one down below. You can watch that one through and then come and watch this one and learn about hand placement. Right, so let me start off by saying there is no perfect hand position. There is no set guidelines as to what you want to do, because at the end of the day, handstands is very personal. There's many different ways you can do a handstand depending on what your personal preference is and what you like to do. That's a hugely important factor in this. However, I find there are a few keys which will help most people, especially as you get more into hand balancing. First of all, we have the orientation of the hands themselves. How do we angle the hands? Now, a lot of times I see beginners, they like to have their hands pointing out when they're doing handstands. So the main issue with having the hands turned out is simply that it gives you less leverage to play with and less strength to adjust and correct the handstand. When we balance the handstand, we end up pushing out of the hands and the fingers to adjust our balance. When you're balancing this handstand, there's only actually two directions you can fall, and that is forwards or backwards. Now, if you have your hands turned out, it means that you only actually have really the thumb and the index finger to influence that balance. If instead we turn our hands inwards and have them straight on middle finger facing forward, this means we then bring into play pretty much all of our fingers and a little bit of our thumb so that we can use them to adjust our balance and our position. So whilst yes, you can have your hands turned out if you want to, as I mentioned, this is a hugely individual thing. If you're struggling with balance and maybe you're not getting as much control as you want, try for a few sessions to have your hands facing forwards with the middle finger straight and see if that makes a difference to your balance. I've had this with quite a few clients where they're turning their hands in and all of a sudden they increase their holds by 5-10 seconds just because they have more control in that position. So now we've got, our idea of where we want the orientation of our hands to be. The next thing we need to look at is how wide should we have those hands in respect to each other, because we could have the hands super narrow and we could have the hands super wide. And there's probably several reasons why you don't want to do either of those two positions. The most common mistake that I see beginners do is they go pretty wide with their hand placement. Now this one feels more natural to do initially. However, it does make the handstand itself harder. It actually makes it harder to balance, and it makes it harder to keep the shoulders in a more stable position. The only thing that it will assist with is it will make it slightly easier to get the arms overhead. Having the hands very, very wide and having the hands close together are actually two advanced progressions of the handstand. The very wide handstand would be the Japanese handstand, something that I'm not particularly great at. And then having the narrow hands handstand is, again, it's an advanced variation of maybe something you'd include when you're working towards the one-arm handstand. So generally speaking, somewhere in between is good for most people. Now, what I like to say to people is go with shoulder width. That tends to work pretty well. Now, I understand that shoulder width can be a little bit ambiguous for some people, so if you want to put a metric on it, something that's commonly referred to in gymnastics for the width that you would set your parallel bars is the distance from your elbow to the end of your index finger. So we can use something similar for hand balancing if we're thinking about those 2 points being the center of our palms. For those of you out there who are working towards the one-arm handstand or perhaps some more advanced handstand variations, you may benefit from a slightly closer hand placement, especially with one-arm handstand. The closer you have your hands, the easier it becomes to then transition weight from one side to the other. This was definitely a big turning point for me when I was learning to initially transfer weight for the one arm. It was much easier having the hands closer together. This one is just kind of advice and a recommendation. If you're struggling with your handstand, if you're not quite happy, try this out for a few sessions, see how it feels. But that's basically it. Those are the two ways in which we might want to consider how we change our hand position for the handstand. Number one is orientation. I don't recommend having it too far turned out. I know a lot of people, you see almost 90 degrees. That's going to be much harder control than just standard straightforward. It's going to give you much more control on the floor. The next one is just hand width. Don't go too wide and don't go too narrow. Somewhere in between generally works best for most people. I like shoulder width, or we can use that measurement of elbow to index finger. But that is basically it for this week, guys. If you enjoyed this video, you can hit that thumbs up button and support the channel. If you have any questions about hand placement and handstand or handstands in general or whatever, just leave a comment in the comment section down below and I will do my best to respond to you. Whilst you're down there, you can also hit that subscribe button and join the Bodyweight Warrior tribe. But that has been it for this week, guys. I'll catch you in the next episode. Have a strong week and peace.